I decided to do a video for my critique of the lesson plan. So I'll talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the lesson plan in this video, and then questions 3 through 8 will be written out. So the strengths that I saw in this lesson plan, to start out on day 1, it says, have the students respond to the following statement in their science journals or on a sheet of paper. I thought that was a good idea to have the students write about their observations of these two things, a rock and a wooden plank. I like that they are expressing themselves in words through writing in a science journal. I like the idea of having a science journal so that they can write down things that they learn or their observations and have it all compiled in one place. And then later, after the students have 4 or 5 minutes to write down their answers to this question, they'll discuss it as a class, or I guess it just says discuss their answers. So I think that's a good idea to have a class discussion about the answers that they wrote to get things started, the discussion in the class going. And then on point 3, it says, after students have had sufficient time to complete this activity, take the time to discuss some of the problems the students might have had entering this list into the circles. So again, I liked the idea of having the class discuss the problems that they faced, because obviously not all students are going to come into this experience with the same knowledge or background, and some of them might have different difficulties, and so it's a good idea to talk about those things as a class to make sure that everyone is on the same page and has the same understanding going forward. And then number 4, as a class, generate a list of things that could go into the intersection of these two circles. I liked generating things as a class. Again, I really liked class discussion. I think that helps students to feel comfortable and feel like, comfortable in contributing their ideas, but also they can learn things from the teacher and from other students. And so it's a good chance for the students to be able to teach each other. And then on day 2, point 3, it talks about it's like roping off different sections for the students to go explore. And I like the idea of them exploring their sections. It's not quite science writing heuristic style, but at least they're getting to go and explore the area and make observations where it's not completely set out for them exactly what they're supposed to do. For the extensions of the lesson plan, it says the students are to list abiotic and biotic factors in the system that have something in common, and then list the commonality in the intersection. So I thought that was a good way of going beyond just introducing the terminology and writing down, like filling out the Venn diagram, but a way to go beyond that and see other things that it could have in common and other ways that they could, talk about or develop and explain relationships between different things. So those are the strengths that I saw. I felt like there were a lot of things that could have been better about this lesson plan. First off, there's no real pre-assessment. They are supposed to write down the difference between a rock and a wooden plank, but it doesn't really show what they understand about biotic and abiotic factors, and so I think it would be good to have a pre-assessment there, and I'll talk about that more later, what I would do for that. Another weakness I saw was that on point 2 for day 1, it says, give them the following list to be entered into a Venn diagram. And so it has a list of all these things like a whale, a clock, water, fish, that students are supposed to put into a diagram. The weaknesses I saw with that were it's not very exciting to be given a list of things. It would be a lot better to have the actual objects there. And obviously you couldn't give the students a whale, but you could have a toy whale, and then that could lead to a conversation about, well, where do we put this? Are we talking about a whale in general? Because that would be biotic, but then if it's the actual toy whale, then that's abiotic because it hasn't lived. And so that could be something that leads to further discussion, which I think could be a good idea. And then also, you wouldn't give them a corpse, but you could have a dead bug and then a living bug, and so there might be some confusion or chance to talk about things there. Another weakness with this activity I saw was that they're given a Venn diagram. And so students might not know about Venn diagrams, or maybe they do, but assuming that they do would not be wise. But also, I think it would be better for them to come up with their own diagram instead of giving them the diagram to fill out. I think it would be good for them to have a chance to make observations and create their own diagram. And then maybe after a class discussion, then you could introduce the idea of a Venn diagram to them if they don't do that already. But I'll talk about my adjustments to this or the rest of the lesson plan after I talk about the weaknesses. And then number 5 on day 1, it says on a whiteboard or overhead, list the 6 characteristics that living things have in common, and then it lists the 6 things. And I think that's it's important for the students to know what they have in common, but I don't think this is the best way to introduce those characteristics to the students, because it's a little bit more lecture-based and not very inquiry-based or exciting for the students to be presented it in that way. And then on day 2, it says give the students a Venn diagram. Again, they're given exactly what they're supposed to do, and there's no way for them to be creative or try to figure out ways of coming up with representing things on their own. And I wasn't a huge fan of the post-assessment either. I mean, I feel like it could be okay, but just it seems like a lot more of just the same thing over and over again, except kind of on a bigger scale each time, I guess. And in this case, it wouldn't be done as a class, it would be more just individual. So anyway, those were some of the weaknesses I saw. So my idea for redoing this lesson plan would be to start out with a rock and a piece of wood, kind of like they talk about having the students write about the differences between those two things. But I think it would be good to show them the actual objects and have the students write down their observations about the two, and it could be anything that they notice, and then they can discuss what they saw with a partner, and then as a class they could discuss it, and then the teacher or I would write on the board the things that we discussed about those two objects. And then that kind of gets them in the habit of making observations and recording them, which is part of one of the ILOs, was to make observations. And so I think that would be a good way to start out. And then instead of having the list of things, actually giving them those objects, and then having them in groups. They would categorize the things that they are given in any way that they want to. So they could come up with their own categories, and then as they do that, they should they'll be given sticky notes, and then for each group that they create, they'll write a description of the things that those objects have in common and put that sticky note in front of the group as a way of making observations and classifying things. And then on a piece of paper, they'll create a diagram and list the items that they have in each category. And so so we'll start out doing that, and then possibly, depending on time, we could discuss as a class the things that they do to classify, like the different groups that they created and the things that they base those groups on. And if we do that and discuss it at that point, and they do talk about biotic versus abiotic principles, then we can just go with that. But if it's not very focused on that, we could say, okay, do this again, but we're going to limit you to 2 categories. And hopefully being limited in that way will get them to realize, well, these things are alive, these things were never alive. And so we'll do that activity and discuss again as a class the classifications that